streaming service. Are we ready? Thank you very much, Siraj. Colleagues, it is Tuesday, the 17th of September, 2024, and this is our scheduled standing committee meeting for social development of the Western Cape Provincial Parliament. I wish to welcome all members present, all guests to the meeting. We also have officials, Advocate Luyanda Mashochisa. A very welcome to you, sir, and Sivile Godu. She? Oh, is she on her way? Thank you very much. Welcome to her as well. These colleagues are from the National Department of Social Development. I also wish to welcome our colleagues from the Provincial Department of Social Development and all other guests, either in person or online. Can I ask, do we have NCOP permanent delegate this morning? Not? Sure, thank you. Colleagues, we will then now proceed to introduce ourselves for the record. My name is Wendy Kaiser-Philander, and I'm the chairperson for the standing committee.
I'm member Memory Boyson. I'm a member of this committee. Thank you. Morning.
Good morning, colleagues. Chairperson, my name is Francois Kamper. I'm the member of the committee. Thank you.
Honorable members online, you may proceed. Okay, member Winvogel indicated that she will be joining online, as well as member Van Minnen, and we will also have the provincial minister Lond joining us online. Namonde is just furnishing the link to them. Then I will then deal with our introductions from official side.
Good morning, Honorable Chair, Honorable Members. I'm Luyanda Mshochisa from the Department of Social Development, Pretoria. Thank you.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and members. I'm Charles Jordan. I'm the Chief Director for Children, Families and Vulnerable Groups in the Western Cape Department of Social Development. Thank you.
Morning, Honorable Chair and members. I'm Patiswa Momoza, Director for Vulnerable Groups, responsible for older persons, as well as also persons with disabilities, employed by Department of Social Development in Western Cape. Thanks.
Good morning, everybody. I'm Vanessa Damon. I'm a social policy developer in the Older Persons Program in the Provincial Office.
Thank you. Good morning. The name is Shanaz Seria. I am a state law advisor with legal services in the Department of the Premier, Western Cape Government. Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Bazuna Stofile from the Department of the Premier, responsible for human rights mainstreaming support. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Romeo Master. I'm the legal advisor at Western Cape Provincial Parliament, assigned to assist this committee with this bill. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Ben Daza. I'm the Senior Procedural Officer for the Standing Committee.
Good morning, Honorable Chair and members. My name is Notemba Sonjita. I'm a legal officer at the Commission for Gender Equality.
Thank you so much, and a warm welcome to you. Then we have honorable members joining us. Members, please introduce yourself for the record.
Thank you very much, Chair. Greetings to everyone. I'm Member Aisha Kas. Thank you.
Good morning. I'm Member Donita Stevens, and I'm a member of this committee.
Thank you very much, members. And we also have officials joining us. Kindly introduce yourselves, please.
Good morning, honorable members. My name is Civil. The surname is Lehodu, and I'm the Chief Director responsible for the Program of Older Persons at National Department of Social Development. Thank you.
Good morning, honorable members. Good morning, colleagues. My name is Naomi Malova.
from the National Department of Social Development responsible for policy and legislation for older persons. Thank you.
Thank you so much, colleagues. I believe that deals with our introductions this morning. And then we have our very capable procedural officer next to me.
Morning, members. My name is Nomanda Jamuka, Procedural Officer for Standing Committee on Social Development.
Thank you very much. And then we have Ms. Hassan Musa. Thank you for your support this morning as well. And Mr. Shiraz from the ICT services as well. Colleagues, the purpose of today's meeting is for the committee, standing committee, provincial standing committee, to receive a briefing on the Older Persons Amendment Bill, B11B of 2022, as referred to by the NCOP. Colleagues, if it's in order with you, and I'm speaking to the honorable members, that we now proceed to have the briefing. We have been furnished with documentation in that regard, after which we will open for question and answer session in that regard, or inputs to the proposed amendments to the bill. May I ask who will be presenting? Ms. Legodu, we are in your hands. You ready?
In 2 minutes time. Let her flag
Sure.
the presentation so long
Thank you.
so that we can all be.
Ms. Legodu, you can give us an indication when you're ready, but we also have another guest to our meeting, Minister Lund, for the record. Please introduce yourself.
Thank you, Chairperson. Today is one of those days that I cannot wait for Metro Rail to get back up to speed. We had 2 accidents on the way in, but here safely, and thank you for having me, Chairperson. And I'm somehow going to grab this opportunity like a politician usually does, and just want to thank this committee for flagging the issues that our social workers are facing. It has been in the media now, and with the budget period coming up, I also hope that my colleagues all over here, how important it is that we give this department the necessary funding to look after our social workers and in turn look after our clients, the residents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Minister. We are always very blessed to have you with us, and I know you take any and every opportunity to be with this committee. We do appreciate it. Ms. Legodu, you ready for us?
Can flag the presentation so that they can be able to see. She needs to share the presentation. I think she's struggling.
Shiraz. Shiraz, can we have some assistance, please? So.
Good morning once more, members, and let me also acknowledge the minister and yourself, Chairperson, and all honorable members and colleagues, of course, from the Department of Social Development and stakeholders in attendance. My name is Civil, as I've already indicated, and my surname is Lehodu. I will be leading the presentation on the Older Persons Amendment Bill of 2022, which is a Section 76 Bill, B11B of 2022. Now, just in terms of introductory remarks, whilst my colleague is trying to share the presentation, and in the interest of time, let me indicate that as a country, we have not been fortunate to escape the impact of population aging. So South Africa is definitely an aging population. We have also noted the heightening percentages of those that live longer, with the implication of us now starting to have a rising number of centenarians. Now, having said that, I need to indicate that South Africa itself has a population of 5.7 million older persons. And with this number being shared with you, I also would like you to note that the Western Cape province takes care of 800,000 of this 5.7 million. So those older persons are the ones that are in your care as a province. And we currently have on our SOC pen system, which is linked to SASSA, 8,479 centenarians. Now, out of the 8,479 centenarians, the Western Cape takes care of 147, 133 being females and 14 being males. I thought it would be important for the committee to note these issues so that as you listen to some of the issues that we are going to be sharing with you this morning, you are also privy to this critical statistical information. Now, having said that, we gather here this morning to come and share with you the Older Persons Amendment Bill of 2022 to enable you to understand where we are at this point in time in terms of this amendment bill. Just also to indicate that this amendment bill is linked to the Principal Act, which is the Older Persons Act number 13 of 2006, which came into operation in 2010. We started implementing the Older Persons Act number 13 of 2006 back in 2010. And since then, we picked up some challenges. Obviously, when something is new, you would obviously expect that there would be teething problems in terms of whatever processes that would be linked to such a process. And in this regard, we experienced some implementation challenges, and those implementation challenges were linked to institutional arrangements. We had challenges in terms of institutional arrangements, and that was, at both the provincial and the national levels of government. We also had coordination mechanism issues as well as compliance measure issues. In some instances, we realized that many government departments were not ready to fully implement some of the imperatives of this legislative framework, but we also struggled to anchor some of the responsibilities and the expectations and roles of various government departments as they would be linked to their core mandates to such departments. This compromised compliance a lot, and hence I'm saying even compliance measures were challenged. So the Older Persons Amendment Bill was, extensively consulted across the sector. We involved various stakeholders, such as the South African Older Persons Forum. We also involved the South African Human Rights Commission. And maybe as I'm talking about the South African Human Rights Commission, I need to indicate that some years ago, the late Minister Squia commissioned, a committee that went around, trying to assess, the challenges of older persons, even across residential facilities. And there are reports that came which were not, not so appealing reports. So those reports elevated, a lot of abuse, and to that effect, the department, in partnership with the South African Human Rights Commission, had to establish a task team that looked at, an approach that could be adopted, and eventually an agreement was reached that it was necessary for us to establish what we call the South African Older Persons Forum. So that forum is being supported at national in terms of funding, and we have also requested that provincial departments also support that forum so that it becomes the eyes and the ears of government to assist and support us in terms of dealing with the challenges of older persons. So we involved that forum as well, and the South African Human Rights Commission. We engaged with various government departments because they equally have a contribution to make towards the successful implementation of the Principal Act. And the reason why we are saying so is that much as the Department of Social Development remains the lead department in terms of the implementation of this legislation, we equally, would not be in a position to comprehensively deliver a basket of services that is required by all our vulnerable older persons. So we need the Department of Health, for example, in spaces of residential care facilities, because we need nurses to be there to support, those that render services in such facilities. We also would require the support of subs in the event our older persons go to substations requiring any kind of support, be it to report cases of abuse or be it for them to receive any other kind of a service. And when they have cases that require, the support and attention of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, we also expect such a department to be sensitive to the needs of this vulnerable group, to be able to afford them, seamless processes and care when they get through the justice system. Let's say, for example, they have reported cases of abuse. They require protection for them to successfully see their cases through the justice system. So these are some of the issues that make us to say we really need the support of various government departments in so many ways. Various government departments have got a contribution to make in this regard. Our non-profit organizations, our institutions of higher learning, we really need to depart from a notion where we are guided by research, because without us being guided by research, we will really not be able to effectively plan. We will not be effective in terms of, providing services aligned to what the globe is expecting from us. Because as I indicated, we are not the only country that is experiencing population aging. We are not the only country with heightening numbers of older persons who live longer. And hence I was sharing those figures with you so that we are all aware of the realities that are confronting this country in terms of the plight of older persons. We have also engaged the private sector at both provincial and national levels to ensure that, we rope them in for their support and buy into all the processes that we embark on. Now, provincial and national consultative workshops with stakeholders in the field of aging were conducted extensively during 2014 and 2015, and we received extensive inputs from those sessions, which we managed to successfully consolidate into the amendment bill. Now, the amendment bill was then subsequently submitted to the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor for pre-certification, and the pre-certification was then issued in November 2016. And the reason was for us to ensure that we are aligned to our constitution and that the legislation was relevant in terms of making sure that it was also responsive to the needs of those that it seeks to serve. And we had to also embark on one of the critical processes, which is the socioeconomic impact assessment system process. We did that with the Department of Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation in November 2016. And we also had to embark upon the final processes in June 2021. And the Older Persons Amendment Bill was then presented to the Technical Working Group and the Social Protection, Community and Human Development Cluster, where the DGs of the various government departments sit. And we did that specifically to make sure that we brought to the attention of the DGs of various government departments the issues that I raised earlier on, issues of non-compliance, the need for them to also buy in and commit to the processes that would lead us to the effective implementation of this key legislative framework. Now, the bill was subsequently presented to Cabinet on the 21st of February 2017, and it was also approved for gazetting for public comments during the same time. Eventually, in June 2017, we managed to gazette this bill for 30 days so that we could solicit some input from the general public and start considering their comments. I need to also indicate that we successfully managed to receive input from 32 stakeholder groupings, which comprised of our non-profit organizations, government departments, law firms, institutions of higher learning, the South African Human Rights Commission, the South African Older Persons Forum, and the general public. These inputs in general commended the department for the work that had been done in terms of the consolidation of the amendment bill and the related, improvements that we had considered. And to that effect, there were just minimal comments and proposed additions, and these were mainly linked to the definitions, because there was a feeling that the definitions needed to be strengthened, and we retreated and looked at all those input that we received from the stakeholder groupings. As indicated, there were 32 stakeholder groupings, and the relevant inputs were then considered and incorporated into the amendment bill. Then the amendment bill was then further consulted with the SPC, HDC cluster, and the TWG group, and the DG in January and February of 2018, respectively, for approval for presentation to Cabinet and its subsequent tabling to Parliament. So at that particular point in time, whilst we were preparing to go and present to Cabinet, we realized the introduction of the AU Protocol on Human and People's Rights of Older Persons in Africa. When we looked at that protocol, we realized that it had very critical articles within it, and these articles would then, assist us in terms of the enhancement of the bill, the draft bill that we had in place. So we paused proceeding to Cabinet, and we considered the articles, and it managed to assist us in terms of the plight of older women, especially those that live in rural areas, and specifically linked to their issues and their plight post the passing on of their spouses, and property rights and so forth. So we looked at that, and we managed to facilitate the inclusion and consideration of all those articles that are within the protocol, and we managed to enhance the amendment bill, and we then proceeded in terms of making sure that those inclusions were shared with the Office of the Chief State Law Advisor through our legal services team, and that was granted a sign-off, and it was also indicated that the amendment bill was well aligned with the Constitution of the country and other legislative frameworks that guide our day-to-day work, and those that are within the confines of various other government departments and within our country. So the amendment bill was then presented to the TWG and the SPC HDC cluster again in 2020 to ensure that we received approval from their side with all these new amendments for tabling in Cabinet. Now, we then managed to present the amendment bill to Cabinet in August 2021, and it was approved for tabling in Parliament. So the final certification for the amendment bill was then issued by OSLA in January 2022. The Older Persons Amendment Bill was also gazetted for introduction to Parliament in March 2022. The Older Persons Amendment Bill was then tabled in Parliament on the 3rd of May 2022. And the bill was then introduced to the Portfolio Committee on Social Development on the 26th of October 2022, and it was well received. So the provincial public hearings were then led and facilitated by the Portfolio Committee on Social Development. We worked very closely with the Portfolio Committee throughout these public hearings, and they were conducted across all the 9 provinces, targeting, 4 to 5 areas in each province. I need to indicate that they were extremely extensive and they were very successful, in a sense that many older persons, attended those public hearings. And what happened during those public hearings was that older persons spoke from their hearts in terms of their experiences relating to issues of service delivery and how they experienced, the provision of services to older persons. So these public hearings took place between May 2023 and November 2023, and they were then concluded in November. As a department, we were granted the opportunity to retreat and go and reflect on all the input that was received across the 9 provinces, with extensive reports provided per province by the Portfolio Committee. And on the basis of those reports, the department had to respond to the Portfolio Committee. We were given an opportunity to reflect on all those inputs and to come back to the Portfolio Committee to respond to those issues. When we retreated and reflected on those public hearing reports, we picked it up that indeed, as older persons were engaging with the Portfolio Committee and the department, their issues were entrenched not only within, the provision of services for the Department of Social Development, but also it impacted on various other government departments extensively, so then municipalities and so forth. So we felt it would then be necessary for us not to go to the Portfolio Committee on our own as a department, but we also engaged with our counterpart departments and shared the reports with them and requested them to join us when we went back to the Portfolio Committee for feedback and for sharing of action plans that would enable us to then begin to mitigate against those key issues that were raised by our older persons. And I need to indicate that it was for the first time that we, in fact, joined hands with various government departments when we went to engage with the Portfolio Committee. We had the Department of Human Settlements in attendance. We had SAPS in attendance. We also had the Department of Health also coming to respond. We had SALGA, we had DHET, we also had Science and Technology. And the reasons being, of course, some that I've already indicated, that when older persons, go and receive services within substations, we are expecting subs to follow the National Instruction Number 1 of 2014, which was issued when the Older Persons Act was being implemented. We have noted with concern that some of the issues that older persons were raising relating to how they are being treated at substations are issues that could have otherwise been avoided if they had the substations had in fact implemented the National Instruction Number 1 of 2014. They did acknowledge that they have not really, done well in that regard, and that they would facilitate improvements. They shared their proposed plan with the Portfolio Committee, and we hope that, those improvements will be evident in the near future. The Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, we also had them in attendance. Some of the key areas that the department has also looked at in partnership with this department is the issue of providing support to older persons from the very onset when they provide, they go to substations and they go to the Department of Justice to go through their court system, in terms of their cases, be it abuse or whatever kind of a case, that they should receive the necessary support when they report such matters, and that where they require legal aid, they must also be provided the opportunity to, source legal aid. They can also be allowed to use their own languages so that they can express themselves well. We have also started engaging with the Department of Constitutional Development to say, perhaps older persons should not testify like everyone who is, not vulnerable.
in the presence of perpetrators for that matter, that remote houses should be located, be it shelters or any other, government buildings should be provided for them to testify from that end and be linked to the courts without them being exposed to everyone who will be in the court premises, because just by entering court premises, it also is a threat to them. So the issues of intermediaries, we have been managing children's cases through the provision of intermediary services by social workers, and we're saying older persons are vulnerable. They must also be able to be provided with such services. So these are some of the discussions that are currently underway between the department and the Department of Social Development and the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. We are also saying, on the basis of some of the issues that older persons raised, especially those that are also coming from rural areas, they say they pay for transport, they hire cars at exorbitant fees, and they travel to, urban areas to go and receive their grants. When they get there, then the grants are not there, and they have to go back and come back again for grants. Or they go to medical facilities and there's no medication, and they have to come back again for the collection of such medication due to the absence of medication and so forth at clinics or health facilities, where they also stand on such queues for lengthy periods of times. So these are some of the complaints that came from older persons themselves, the issues that I'm raising. And these have been engaged with these government departments, as I've just indicated. And we, as I said, we are hopeful that as we move along, we will then be able to start noting some improvements in that regard. So we are also saying there's a fast, moving train towards ensuring that science and technology is embraced by everyone. And we're saying we need not leave our older persons behind. They need to be part, and specifically because part of the reasons why we see the rising number of older persons being abused, I'm sure members have noted with concern the trending videos, on print and so on social media, where our older persons are being abused for their social grants. There are lots of videos that are doing rounds in terms of that. But what is also said is that we're noting that some of the abuse also comes from their families and their grandchildren. So these issues are issues of concern. They were raised by older persons themselves, and part of the reason, being the fact that because they are not technologically advanced, they rely on their grandchildren to transfer money and to do all those kind of things for them, because they can't manage any gadgets. And that becomes a problem, because in some instances, if the children are not, reliable, they then transfer to somebody else, or they use the money for themselves, and that creates rifts between themselves and older persons. So just also to indicate that post consideration of all these concerns that were raised by older persons, we facilitated the inclusion and revisitation of certain sections of this amendment bill. And eventually, we had to go back to portfolio committee. And on the 27th of March 2024, eventually the portfolio committee indicated that they were happy with the amendment bill, and they then signed it off. It was then presented to the National Assembly on the 9th of May 2024, and it was then approved by the National Assembly for handing over to the National Council of Provinces for further processing in the 7th administration. And this is where we are. So just in terms of where we are relating to this amendment bill, the amendment bill really allowed us the opportunity to re-look into, new definitions and provisions that relate to the monitoring and evaluation of services that are rendered to older persons. It also seeks to insert some measures for the removal of an older person to a temporary safe care. We know that in the past we used to rely on a court order for the removal of an older person, but because of the delays in terms of the issuing of court orders, we deemed it necessary to really revisit this section of the legislation, specifically because in some instances, if you wait for the court and an older person has been abused and the older person has got to also be left in such a space for longer periods, it compromises their status, it compromises their dignity, it also compromises their integrity. So to that effect, their safety and well-being has now, been reconsidered in terms of this section to say if there's need and the environment is not really good for them, we can facilitate removal by authorities without a court order. So the amendment bill also intends to respond to identified legislative gaps on the Principal Act and similar implementation challenges hampering the protection of older persons. Now, furthermore, we have also tried to address matters of poor coordination and intersectoral collaborations which impacted negatively on the provision of services to older persons, like I did indicate as I was referring to the challenges that we had relating to the implementation of this legislative framework. So the amendments, we hope, will ensure that quality services are provided to our older persons and that there is valuable protection also provided for older persons by the society. So these amendments, we hope, will also strengthen the monitoring and evaluation measures on services to older persons, which are inclusive of proper enforcement measures for non-compliance. That is an imposition of regulated penalties. We now say those that are providing services to older persons and they are not compliant, where there is need, they need to be engaged, and there must be plans to mitigate against whatever circumstances that impede on compliance, and then the issues of penalties then kick in where there is non-response to the issues of compliance. So the amendments also intend to strengthen Chapter 5, which is a very critical chapter of this amendment bill in terms of the protection of older persons, with the introduction of very strict measures and penalties to enhance the dignity of older persons, and thereby promoting their rights, their status, their well-being, their safety, and their protection from any violence, violation, and abuse that would perhaps or at any given point in time be perpetrated against them. Now, I move to the proposed amendments. We have looked at definitions, as I've indicated, at the proposal of our key stakeholders that provided input. We looked at the definition of an older person. Members would be aware that in the past, an older person was defined in terms of a male at the age of 65 and females at 60. We now have everybody being considered an older person when you turn 60. We've relooked at the definition of care, caregiver, manager, person, rehabilitation, and residential facilities. There are also, of course, new definitions which looked at a stakeholder definition, assisted living facility, independent living facility, frail care facility, interdepartmental structure, palliative care, private residential facility, and temporary safe care. And we have also looked at new definitions which were added post-public hearings, and those are focusing on the issues of family care, special care, substance definition of caregiver, which was revised to also include family members. Just to indicate that these definitions, we found them very critical because they would then, clearly indicate who are we referring to when we engage in terms of a specific issue. Like, for example, in terms of caregivers, we had defined caregiver, but we excluded family members. And we know that many families prefer to keep their older persons and take care of them rather than taking them to facilities. So we felt it would be necessary for family members to also be included as per the proposal that came from the public hearings that we had. We noted, the importance of also, clarifying issues around assisted living, independent living, and frail care facilities, specifically because we want to encourage that in such facilities, when an older person has come to a facility because they simply require safe space and care, but they are independent. They should be allowed to continue with their independence, because when people are active, they are able to be, kept away from the burden of diseases. So we are also aware of the program that the department is widely, embarking upon on an annual basis to ensure that older persons are kept active, which is the active aging program. And that happens across all provinces, with build-up activities taking place within the provinces. And eventually, during Social Development Month, we facilitate the broader national active aging program. And all provinces plan and budget for such an activity. And these activities also are expected to happen at district and at provincial levels before they culminate into the national event in October, which is Social Development Month. Now, that is an initiative of making sure that we keep our older persons as active as it is possible. And I think this program has now become more important, specifically because we're noting that our older persons live longer. And if we're having people that live beyond the age of 100, but they do not have quality of life, it is not worth it. So it is better for us to invest in making sure that we keep them active so that they can enjoy their golden years. So in terms of chapter 1, we looked at the objects and the implementation and application and general principles that affect this legislative framework. So section 2 has enabled us to strengthen and protect the rights of older persons in conformity with the Constitution and domestic law, as well as to facilitate the prevention of abuse against older persons. Section 3 has facilitated the insertion of the new subsections 4 and 5 on institutional and coordination mechanisms to include an interdepartmental structure, as well as the strengthening of the partnership between the department and offices of the premiers in relation to the implementation of the Act. I need to also indicate that offices of the premier, we have noted over the years that they are an anchor for the Department of Social Development in terms of making sure that we fully implement this legislative framework. In many provinces where offices of the premier play their role very well and support the programs for older persons, we see that there are very good programs in place, and there is extensive support, and services in such provinces are also at a very good level of provision. Now, we also have looked at making sure that we hold our political principals accountable in terms of the provision of services, because when, for example, there are challenges in a facility and something goes dismally wrong in such facilities, we have noted, and all of us should be aware of the fact that then the minister becomes the second respondent when the MEC becomes the first respondent. And in that regard, we have noted the importance of strengthening the responsibilities, which are going to also be clearly articulated in the regulations once this bill gets to be enacted. And Section 5 speaks to the insertions of subsection 4, which has enabled us to include the necessary measures to eliminate harmful traditional practices, including witchcraft accusations, which affects the welfare, the health, and life and dignity of our older persons. So in this regard, surely members are aware that there are a lot of myths that surround issues of witchcraft. When older persons live longer in many rural communities, they are perceived as witches. And we have also seen lots of videos also doing rounds where older persons have been, in fact, beaten up by their own communities. And normally this would be also an issue that would be linked to their mental health issues when they start experiencing dementia, when they start experiencing Alzheimer's. Then the weird behaviors that they present with of going out of their homes, perhaps being naked or at ungodly hours, then they get to be tagged as witches. And we are saying it is necessary that this gets to be fully addressed, noting that we now have older persons who are living longer and also, who become centenarians. And when the population grows, it means these kinds of challenges are also going to grow. So we need to come up with strategies that are going to enable us to fully address these kinds of challenges, address issues of ageism, address, issues of aging, so that the communities within which older persons live understand why they would present with certain behaviors and how such behaviors should be managed. And these are to be done through extensive awareness campaigns by all key stakeholders. So in terms of Section 7, there's an insertion that is linked to Section 7A, 7B, to make provision for the responsibilities of older persons towards the younger generation. But we also looking at the issue of intergenerational dialogues. Remember, I did indicate earlier on that there is a growing wedge between the two generations because of the behaviors of the younger generation, where they in fact abuse older persons through taking their grants. But also now, in many areas, we have been informed by older persons themselves that where there are service centers, and they go there during the day, at night they go back home. Remember, there's supposed to be food, there's supposed to be what? So all those issues which are done by the younger generation, they indicate that they go to such service centers at night, they break in, they take their equipments, they take their food and so forth. So there's a lot that is currently happening between the two generations. And we know that in the past, grandchildren and younger generations, we used to be joy to older persons. So today we're seeing this growing wedge, and we are saying we need to extensively look at, programs that are going to assist us in terms of bridging this particular gap. And so that we can then effectively make sure that we provide for the protection of the rights of older persons and ensure that they also feel that they are part of the community and that their rights are upheld and they are respected. So Chapter 3 looks at community-based care and support services for older persons. We are looking at this as an area that we also need to strengthen, specifically because as the numbers of older persons grow, as we have more centenarians, we are not going to be able to have everybody having a space in a residential care facility, even if such a service is required. So to that effect, we are saying families must be strengthened. And earlier on, I indicated that abuse also happens within families, where you are in fact expecting that the families must be a safety space for everyone. So if abuse is happening in families, it means we need to strengthen families. We need to strengthen the communities where these abuses of older persons and accusations of witchcraft are happening. And awareness must also be brought to such communities so that the communities become a safe space for older persons. And for us to be able to keep older persons in communities, we know that it means they will require more support. So we are now training caregivers to make sure that those older persons who live in communities and are able to live on their own or with their families but would require additional support, then they are able to tap onto the support that would be provided by caregivers. So the need for monitoring of such work is also, important. And we are saying the training that I'm referring to is accredited training, so that when people solicit such support, then it's dependable and reliable support that we know would definitely make a difference in the lives of older persons. And in terms of residential care facilities, which is Chapter 4, we speak to a very critical issue here, where we are saying facilities and residential care facilities, as well as our community-based care and support facilities, must be owned by juristic persons. We're moving away from individualistic approaches to the ownership of these facilities, so that we are able to hold people accountable, because if it's an individual owning a facility and not a juristic person, it then becomes a challenge when such a person experiences challenges and you do have older persons within such a facility. And we're saying they must be registered with the department and reports to that effect must be submitted as would be dictated by the relevant legislative frameworks, so that compliance and accountability can still be, in place. So in the event all these things are not adhered to and there are challenges within such facilities, we have Section 18 now that has been inserted to make provision for the deregistration of such facilities, their closing down and revocation of registration of residential or community-based care facilities. And in that regard, we are saying systems will be in place, people will be engaged, there will be proper consultations, plans would be required from such people to mitigate against whatever is happening in such facilities. And in the event there are no improvements or movement towards compliance, then Section 18 kicks in, where deregistration and closing or and revocation of such a registration of such facilities would then take place. And we are saying, even when we do so, if there are older persons within such facilities, then care must be provided to make sure that their interest, their well-being and their safety is also prioritized. So monitoring and evaluation of residential facilities then has also been strengthened to address, for example, issues that we saw with life acid demania, so that we can then tighten compliance measures and monitoring and evaluation systems. Then a very critical chapter I referred to earlier on the protection of older persons, which is chapter 5, specifically section 25, has been included to amend an older person in need of care and protection to include a person who has been or is being maltreated, abused, neglected, or degraded by a caregiver or a family member, or a person who has been accused of practicing witchcraft or blamed by the community for inexplicable events. It has also enabled us to deal with the removal of an older person to a temporary safe care without a court order. I'm not going to explain this, as I've already talked to them extensively. Section 25 also, in terms of subsection B, deals with older persons with disabilities and chronic illnesses. We thought it would be important that we also elevate the plight of older persons with disabilities to make sure that their needs are also effectively well taken care of. This section has enabled us to do so and speak to their plight. Section 26 has enabled us to tighten the inclusion of 48-hour time frame for investigation of abuse of an older person. And I need to indicate that the department for many years has been also guided by what we call a protocol on the management of elder abuse. It dictates and clarifies the procedures and processes, as well as the timeframes that need to be followed by anyone who deals with the plight of an older person who has been abused. Section 28 also has provided for the insertion of new subsection 7 for older persons to be allowed to be assisted by intermediaries and to testify or be cross-examined through an intermediary or in camera in the language that they understand, for protection of older persons undergoing court processes. I've already talked about that. Section 30 has been tightened by extending the definition of physical abuse to include unlawful detention, medical sedation. We know that when older persons are experiencing mental health issues, issues of dementia and so forth, in some instances, some families or even the carers, they sedate them in order for them to have their own breaks away from them, so that they can also have their rest. They sedate them for unnecessarily lengthy hours. And we have now included that as part of abuse, the shackling of older persons. We know even in hospitals, some instances you find that these things are happening. So we have also noted a rising number of facilities, perhaps due to budgetary constraints, where we have been alerted of older persons who do not receive nutritional meals. So we have looked at this to ensure the strengthening of these sections. And Section 33 has enabled us to also amend the definition of sexual abuse, to amend this definition of psychological abuse, and to define harassment as well as spiritual abuse. As we know, many older persons are spiritual beings. Now, Section 30 has also allowed for the insertion of a new subsection which empowers a clerk of the court to register or to provide the minister with the details of an offender. In this regard, this is the work that we are doing with the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, but we are also saying it's important that we have a register for abuse older persons. This register is an expectation in terms of this legislation that the Minister of Social Development must keep that register. And it is on this basis that we are doing all this work that we are doing with the Department of Justice as well as SAPS to ensure that, when older persons report cases, substations treat them well. When their cases go through the Justice and Constitutional Development, they are also treated well, and that conviction eventually and sentencing of those perpetrators must happen, and they must be brought to book so that the register can then work for our older persons. Section 31 speaks to the insertion of subsection 3, which provides that an application to the minister for the removal of a name from the register may be brought by any person after the criminal record or the offender whose name appears in the register has been expunged. Now, that is in support of making sure that the register becomes a live document that works for our older persons. And chapter 6 speaks to the general and supplementary provisions, which is section 33, that we have strengthened to enforce penalties in areas of non-compliance. I've talked about that, which is linked to the issues of registration, monitoring, evaluation of services, and the investigation of elder abuse cases, amongst others. And now penalties have also been introduced, as I said, section 13.5, section 18.1, section 18.9, and section 18A.4. These are sections that have been strengthened to include issues of penalties. And section 35 speaks to the transitional provisions which were included for community-based care and support services and residential facilities that were operated by individuals. As I indicated, we're moving to juristic persons, and we are now moving away from the sole proprietorship. So any person operating a community-based care and support service, home-based care, or a residential facility as a sole proprietor, immediately before this act took effect, must within 12 months from the date on which this act took effect convert the sole proprietorship to a juristic person. So in conclusion, I want to say to the committee members, kindly note the work that has been done by the department with the support of the outgoing portfolio committee. And also, I would like to say to the committee that extensive work was done through consultative sessions with all the key stakeholders, which then led to us concluding on this work, specifically because we wanted to ensure that we brought everybody on board in terms of making sure that we collectively work towards promoting the rights of older persons, upholding their dignity and integrity, as well as their well-being, and ensuring that all issues of population aging are upheld by government and key stakeholders to ensure the readiness of this country in addressing issues of population aging. I thank you.
Ms. Legodo, thank you so much for a very insightful presentation. We do appreciate. Colleagues, at this, I think before we go to the question and answer session of this meeting, I'm going to allow for the provincial department to give us any inputs if they so wish. Minister, I'm going to start with you. Any remarks or inputs from your side?
No, we have very competent officials that will take us through that part. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. Over to the department. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister and Honourable Chair. So we will do a presentation. Patiswa Mimosa, our director, will do the presentation. So we've handed it out, but I can just say from my side, as a starting point, this is a very progressive bill amendment. And as a Western Cape province, we do support in general the bill with all the definitions, with all the amendments that's been made. It's stuff that was outstanding for this past 14 years that was now addressed since the original bill was implemented. There is some concerns from ourselves as a department with regards to budgets, but I will give Ms. Mimosa the opportunity to do the presentation because that will come out what I've just highlighted now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jordan. Ms. Mimosa.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to present to the committee what we foresee or the impact of the bill on the province. And I'm seeing that everyone has got a copy. We shared it. Yes, thank you so much. I'll just talk through to the presentation that in front of me, or else to be assisted to be projected. Okay, it's fine. I'll talk through the presentation. As the department, when we were requested to come and present what we see as an impact of the Older Persons Amendment Bill to the province, we first thought that it's quite important when we present our input also to put it into context so that you can understand as to where we're coming from as the department. For instance, it's quite critical to share. Sometimes you'll see then that it's like we're repeating ourselves. What my colleague Civil have already shared, especially the profile of older persons in Western Cape, that is the population in Western Cape. Also to share the budget, not only the current budget, also to look back in the previous financial years as to where we are. And to look also in terms of the footprint, in terms of service provision, the financial implications, and of which these aspects are critical before we zoom straight into our input, what we foresee as an impact. But also, as Mr. Jordan has indicated, that we fully support the bill and all the recommendations, all the amendments that are being proposed are of necessity to bridge and also to fill the gap in service delivery. Coming to the profile of older persons population in Western Cape, it is quite important to brief the committee saying that in Western Cape is the home to 818,399 persons, and that is persons aged 60 years and older. Of this 818,000, 58% are women. This is the report that we are getting from the stats, the census report. That is the latest stats. Also, there are also the stats. It's also giving us projections, saying that the aging population is expected to grow from this 818. That is by 2021 to 1,088,000. And also this figure to triple to 2,044,000 by 2050. It means we have gotten population aging, of which we need to ensure then that we put all systems in place. We ensure then that all the necessary, the aging population, they are receiving the service that they are entitled to. Maybe if I may share a little bit in terms of this 818,399 older persons, majority are in the city of Cape Town, where they have got 485,588. And then followed by Cape Winelands. Cape Winelands has got 142,860, which is that's a figure for Cape Winelands and Overberg. For instance, Cape Winelands on its own, it's 89,885, and Overberg, it's 52,975. That gives us an overall total of 142,860 older persons in the Cape Winelands region, followed by Eden Karoo, sitting at 133,841. Of this 133,841, in Gardner Road, it's 123,275. And if you look at Central Karoo, it's 10,566. And then lastly, with West Coast, sitting at 55,608. That's the breakdown of these 818,000 older persons in the province. Coming to the budget, we felt that it's also important just to share as to how the budget looks like currently and also taking a step back in the previous financial years. And if I may start now, 2024 to 2025, you will see currently we have got a budget that is as the program itself, older persons, were allocated a budget of 217 million. 2023, 2024, it was at 235,907,000. 2022, we're sitting at 235,912. And you can see the gradual decrease in terms of the budget allocation for this program. 2021 and 2022 financial year, we set at 236,362, meaning then that the budget allocation to this program is gradually decreasing, and it has been made worse in this current financial year, where we had to absorb a 17 million budget cut. And also in terms of the service provision, currently in the province, we have got residential facilities that are run and managed by NPOs, of which in total we've got 113 across the province. And also we've got the private residential facilities that have been registered by the department in terms of the Older Persons Act, sitting at 119,000. We've got independent living facilities. Currently, they are 10. Initially, when we began this financial year, they were 11. One has since closed down. They couldn't take it anymore in terms of the financial sustainability. Also, assisted living facility, beginning of the financial year, we had 16. Currently, as we stand in, we've got 15. One has closed down as well. Community-based care and support services, currently we're supporting as the department these services. They are 144. And we've got social service organizations that are 7, that is are rendering the services across the entire province. They are mainly the mother bodies and also are responsible to provide social work intervention support to these organizations as and also to the training programs. When it comes to financial implications, yes, we acknowledge, and my colleague has indicated then that the Department of Social Development with the custodian, and we are the lead department for the provision of services to older persons. But we acknowledge that for comprehensive service provision, we cannot do that on our own as the department. There are also other stakeholders that are critical in terms of service provision. Yes, I indicated earlier when I was beginning my saying that, yes, all proposed amendments are commendable because they are also addressing the issues of to ensure provision of quality service, and which we are seeing declining based on the number of complaints that we are receiving. And I'm not saying or also to defend the organizations that are providing the service. If a funding to a particular organization has been stagnant for the past 8 years, and also you take into account the rising costs, for instance, the funding, the increase in our funding organs, especially the residential facilities, your community-based, it has been stagnant for the past 8 years. So they have not seen or received any increase for the past 8 years. And if you look at the operational costs, everything is going up. And that has got a detriment effect in terms of the quality of the service that is being provided, the municipal costs, the food, the staff, etc. And also we understand then that it is also quite critical that whoever is providing the service, norms and standards, they need to be complied with, but we also need to meet them halfway. Also, the amendments, the proposed amendment, they seek to address the issue of protection of older persons in the society at large. However, I also want to register then that the assertion in the bill, the last part saying that provinces will have to prioritize from the baseline, that is the implementation of this the bill. Provinces, they have to prioritize from the baseline due to the current fiscal constraints. This indeed, from the onset, it poses a challenge, especially if we look at that the Department of Social Development, their allocation this current financial year, it had a shortfall. It was cut by 40 million. Then if you were to say that the provinces, they need to prioritize within the baseline that has been cut to the core, it poses a challenge. And we then put forward saying that, yes, we acknowledge and we are also grateful of all the insertions and also all the amendments that are proposed, when we need to be mindful of the fact that they come with additional responsibilities. And additional responsibilities, they necessitate additional resourcing in terms of finance and also in terms of capacity as well. That was the background that I needed to provide before I get to our actually zooming straight into the specific provisions that are being proposed. If you look at clause 9, which talks about the prescribed or accredited training of caregivers. This means that caregivers providing service, whether it's a home-based care or frail care, they need to undergo an accredited training. We already have got caregivers in the residential facilities and also caregivers providing service in the home-based care, meaning then that not all those caregivers, they received the accredited training. National is busy. They came to the province also to take through the organizations on the accredited training program. But all that, for us to roll out, we need a budget. And this rollout of the training, it needs to be costed. We need to cost the training program so that it can be well resourced, not to take a responsibility and drop it at the edge because of the financial constraints. So what we are saying that here, we're suggesting as the province that yes, we appreciate the accredited training program and also the upskilling of the caregivers, so that will improve the quality of care, thus complying to the norms and standards that are being set. But however, we need to also ensure then that additional resources are being afforded, hence giving support to NPOs. We cannot expect NPOs to ensure that all caregivers without supporting them as well, to ensure that all their caregivers and the service improves. And also, if you look at clause 10, it mentions monitoring and evaluation of community-based care and support services. And before the bill, the Act, it only mentioned the residential facilities, stating that we need to visit and monitor, of which as the province, this is what we're currently doing. We're not only looking at residential facilities, but also monitoring of all services that are being provided. However, we need to ensure then that what I just want to suggest is that as the province, and also being guided also by the Act, we need a better guidance on frequency for uniformity purposes. For instance, in the Western Cape, we adopted a 3 to 5 year approach in terms of the monitoring. So this needs to be spelled out. For instance, if you look, I gave in terms of the service provision as to how many NGOs are we dealing with in the province. I know that Western Cape and Gauteng, they are the most provinces with the highest numbers of NPOs that needs to be monitored. For instance, I mentioned 119 private and 113 residential facilities. I mentioned 144 service centers, and all are funded and needs to be monitored. And with a staff complement of 20, how do we then expect to reach out to everyone within a year? Hence, the department adopted that 3 to 5 year approach. It's not feasible. Hence, we're saying that better guidance also in terms of frequency for uniformity across the country, and also provision of additional capacity and resources so that the province can be able to visit, ensure then that we visit all, and we ensure then that we continue strengthening the monitoring of all these facilities. Clause 12, registration of assisted living facilities or similar facilities by the department. Also to note that this is an additional responsibility which is being tabled. Currently, we are responsible to register the residential facilities, whether it's private or NPO, as well as also community-based service centers. However, now we're adding another, which is assisted living. We're not saying they must not be registered, but also need to take into account the provision of additional capacity and resourcing. Also, another clause which we are grateful of, the closing of a residential facility or community-based facility services, especially the unregistered or illegal residential facility services, which we are experiencing a challenge in the province, mushrooming of facilities, where the quality of care and safety of residents is being compromised. It's a challenge, and this recommendation for the amendment, it's well uploaded because it's been missing on the actual act, the principal act. However, what we're saying that we need better guidance on roles and responsibilities of all organs of state that will be responsible to execute this function. Because currently, as to when it comes to the closure of a facility, who is supposed to play which role? It's not only social development. This needs to be spelled out, and I'm hoping then that in the regulations it will come clear so that each and every state organ takes seriously its role. When it comes to closure of a residential facility, we know that there are clearly spelled guidelines as to who's going to execute what. And hence, I'm saying that we need clearly spelled processes that needs to be followed in the execution of this function. Maybe Charles, we will elaborate more on this because this is the challenge that we are grappling with as the province currently. Charles, I'm not sure whether you'll let me finish or you'll just touch on expand while we are still on this subject.
Yeah, I think while we're on this subject, I think there is various role players that needs to start playing a role when it comes to closure of residential facilities. We do find, as Batiste was indicated, a few popping up. A person wants to make money, so they take their house and they rent it out to 6 older persons or 8 older persons, cramped, not giving proper services, no proper trained carers, so placing the older persons at risk. Now, if you look at the municipality's got a major role to play as well with their bylaws. It's with regards to zoning rights, it's with regards to health and safety clearance, occupational safety. The environmental health officers need to do all of that stuff. So when we close a place, and with the previous act, we couldn't really because it was very silent on that for DSD. But with this amendment of the bill, there needs to be clear roles. We can take the lead, but where does the municipality come in? Where do they do the closures when there is issues with municipal bylaws that we are as a province not responsible for? So that means that the municipalities also need to take a role if there's issues on zoning or with health and safety, occupational certificates not being issued, or even nutritional, because you've got to issue a certificate for nutrition as well. And also municipalities must indicate how many people are allowed to stay on a property. There's an occupational certificate for that, which we can't issue, the municipality must. So that's the kind of roles that we need to look at. And for me, also a major role currently is Department of Health. Department of Health do not participate in any of these processes in any province, as far as I know. Civil can correct me. So for that reason, we had to appoint health auditors, specialized nurses, to help us with audits from a health perspective. Our social workers are social workers, they're not trained health practitioners. So we are reliant on professional health experts when we do health audits within facilities. So if I look at this act, with the closure even of a place, health department should also play a very strong role with assisting with the investigation, assisting with the report, because there's got to be a report before you can just close a place, with all the evidence and facts in that report. And if there's any health aspects, then the Department of Health should also then be able to assist us with that process. I think that's that in a nutshell. Thanks, Batiswa.
Thank you, Charles. The next clause that we wanted to comment on, older persons in need of care and protection and needs immediate emergency protection. And the amendment, the proposed amendment is removal of an older person to a temporal safe care. What we want to table in this house is a securing of temporal safe care. This is a challenge that we are currently experiencing. Securing of temporal safe care or any place for emergency placements. We need resources. We need to secure that. Currently, there isn't. The facilities that we currently, the NPO, because in the province, we don't have a state-run facility. It's all facilities which are owned and managed by NPOs. And they are almost full to capacity. So if we are really serious in terms of addressing the issues of abuse, where it necessitates the removal of an older person from his or her home and placing them in a temporal state of, we need to have those facilities. How we secure, we need resources, of which it's uploaded. We need but proper resourcing so that we ensure then that we fully implement this the bill. And also what we also need to be mindful of is that if you remove a person to a temporal safe care or any placement or any emergency placement, definitely there are emergency or placement fees, because you cannot take a person and place without leaving anything. There needs to be financial support. We also say that we need this needs to be properly costed and resourcing. It's not only financial, but also human capacity as well. Firstly, it's avail to ensure that we have got enough secure facilities, whether we ensure then that we reserve the bed spaces in the residential facilities, but it all needs funds. Also, this clause, it also touches on older persons with disabilities and chronic illnesses. If we talk of older persons with disabilities, definitely we cannot talk of an older person with disability without also taking into account the reasonable accommodation. We need to take into account the special needs of those older persons. Provision of older persons with family care or special care as and when appropriate. What we are putting up is that, yes, we are mindful, and also we acknowledge the role of family members in taking care of the elderly. But with this clause, we need to also to sort of unpack exactly what do we mean unpacking the family care or the special care to minimize ambiguity and also transferring the role of the family to the state. Where do we draw the line so that the family doesn't abdicate their responsibility to the state? And also, where do we draw the line? This needs to come out clearly. And also, we're noting insertion saying that, or strengthening, say that when we're removing an older person, we need to obtain a court order within 48 hours for placement of older person in temporal safe care. We need an order within 48 hours. And also, we cannot ensure then that we comply with this provision if there isn't an MOU and a full understanding between the department and also the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Also take into account what happens in terms of the children's court inquiries. We need that commitment so then that if the act is saying 48 hours, then also because it's the magistrates that are responsible for issuing of the court orders, that process is not does not get delayed. It means there needs a thorough understanding MOU between the department and also Department of Justice for the smooth running of issuing of the 48 hours or the social workers taking the matter to the court. So I think that's our input in terms of the bill which is being tabled and the impact that we foresee as the department. And once again, all the recommendations, all the recommended amendments are commendable because it's a gap in terms of service delivery. We fully support. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Mimosa. Advocate Maasdorp, at this point, is there any comments from your side or input that you would like to share with the committee?
Chairperson, I certainly have some input. If you want me to do it now, as you requested, I would certainly share that.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Maybe just for the record, Chairperson, I have read this bill. I have read the Principal Act. And interestingly, the Principal Act identifies itself as a framework. And maybe just for the colleagues from National, I have two questions. And if you don't mind, I'm pretexting my questions with the following input. So the Principal Act defines itself as a framework, and one can understand that because this act, the Principal Act, and indeed also this amendment bill, by its nature, traverses a number of governmental departments. So it certainly can only set itself up as a framework so that applicable or relevant or the appropriate government departments can draw from this act and in that way orientate their own strategic plans, their own bills, etc., to give effect to what is a noble objective envisaged by the bill, by this bill. So what am I saying when I say that this bill, and indeed the act as well, spans across most government departments? I looked at the memorandum on the objects, and a number of departments were correctly consulted with, and they made input. Even the Department of Energy, SAPS, etc. So what are we saying? if this is a framework and it has this reach, these multiple tentacles. What I have not seen in the Act, and let me just put this on record, I've read the Act and the bill, there's nothing unconstitutional about its provisions as it stands. But inasmuch as I'm of the view that there isn't anything glaringly unconstitutional, it is still incumbent on us to make good laws, not necessarily only constitutional laws. And we make good laws when a law comprehensively addresses its purported objective. So, if we, I've noticed a glaring omission, and this is what I wanted to just raise with the National Department, having listened to the input. What I have not seen in the bill, certainly not in the Principal Act as well, is there is the absence of a dedicated mechanism with the responsibility, the function, the objective, the mandate to ensure a post-legislative monitoring. So, out comes the Older Persons Act with all the departments that's affected. A decade and a half later, there's a bill with all the departments affected, with all the objectives that is declared in the Act and in the bill. But I do not see an entity, a government initiative, program, mechanism that purports or seeks to ensure that transversally the objectives of this Act are given effect to. Or are we embarking on a process here to make a law, and we hope, we trust, we believe that the other departments, other than DSD, will one day consult this bill, this Act, and draw from there to inform and orientate their own laws, their own programs, budgets, resources, etc. Are we hoping that, or are we providing in this framework, which it says it's a framework, are we providing in this framework already that it is incumbent on the other departments to give effect to the objectives of this? We've heard of an intergenerational breakdown. I notice, so that's my first question. Why is there not, unless the colleagues from National or anywhere can inform me that there is this, but why is there not an overarching, coordinating entity to ensure a post-legislative scrutiny so that there's a transversal alignment, there's coordination, there's a proper resource distribution so that the objects of the Act is given effect to? We can't just make laws and hope for the best. That's the first issue, observation. I have read the Principal Act, and in Section 6 of that Act, Section 6 of that Act, sorry, Section 7 talks about the rights of older persons. And it sort of embroiders what is envisaged or provided for in the Constitution in Section 9. So the rights of older persons in the Principal Act. Along comes the bill and it now seeks to amend that section. That section that speaks about the rights of older persons. Along comes the bill, and we always talk in a very cliche form of rights and responsibilities. We must not forget we have responsibilities as well. Very cliche, we talk about that. So the Act says the rights of older persons. Along comes the bill, and it speaks of responsibilities of older persons. And it inserts via clause 7 capital A and capital B, it inserts responsibilities, amongst others, and I'm sure the colleagues have read and the colleagues are familiar already with what is in the bill. It says older persons have the responsibility to mentor and pass on knowledge, have the responsibility to foster and facilitate intergenerational dialogue, have the responsibility to play a role in mediation. Noble objectives, noble responsibilities, because it seems that someone who wrote the Act realizes we articulated some duties, but we didn't articulate responsibilities. So let's put a few in there. Why am I saying this? I say it for the following reason. Because I, with my limited knowledge, have not seen in this bill how those responsibilities, who will ensure that those responsibilities are taken up? There's an older person, 61 years old, outside, sits at home, looks after children because the parents have to work, and the parents are in another province. We expect this older person to share knowledge and experience and lifelong learning capacities. Who ensures that? Unless we say, we just make the law to know that it is there, we did say it in the law. There's no follow through. Again, I'm asking, as a corollary to my first question, the issue of a post-legislative mechanism to ensure that this will happen. Is the department or any government department that is impacted by older persons' issues, are they going to use a stick to ensure that there's intergenerational breaches and engagement? Or will there be an incentive to older person to engage in community issues, community structures, remain a lifelong social activist, etc.? Just between brackets, Chairperson, I used to be on a school governing body. And we had endless challenges to get learners' parents involved in school activities, to even become part of governing body activities. And it's always a few handful of people who would be part of driving school activities and attend weekend inter-school challenges and competitions. No incentive, no obligation, no orientation, inclination, or interest by older people to remain or become socially active, let alone impart knowledge, impart life skills, etc. But it's in the law. So the question is, upon whom is it incumbent to ensure that this provision is given effect to? When I say post-legislation monitoring, I was looking at the issue of monitoring. And monitoring in this bill, just like in the Act, is only mentioned in relation to the monitoring and evaluation of facilities and community service center or support services. Only services, not the implementation to ensure the objectives are reached that is envisaged in this. So in effect, Chairperson, my mouthful question comes really down to, does the department envisage, and that's the kind of thing that cannot come out in the regulations, I might add. Does the department envisage a mechanism to ensure that the objectives purported in or provided for in the bill from the preamble are going to be implemented in view especially of the fact that this bill and the act in fact are transversal in its nature and spans across the portfolios and budgets of virtually or of most of the governmental departments. I did touch on the issue of intergenerational breakdown, and I'm sure that that is maybe a subtext to the issue of post-legislative scrutiny, post-legislative monitoring, and how we're going to ensure that those objectives are met. Chairperson, for now, that is it, unless there's questions from the other members.
Thank you very much, Advocate Maasdorp. Ms. Legodu, at this point, I'm going to give you an opportunity to respond to the comments made by the legal advisor. And then, colleagues, we will then have a 5-minute body break and return.
Okay, Chairperson, thank you very much for the opportunity to respond to the comments that have been made by Advocate, and I want to also take this opportunity to thank you for your very critical, comments that you have made and questions which are also, assisting in terms of the creation of a very visionary approach, in terms of how we are going to get this implementation unfolding. Let me start first by indicating that when we refer to the Principal Act as a framework, we refer to any legislative or policy document as policy and legislative frameworks, because our belief is that they parameter and guide the manner in which we operate. So on that basis, that kind of a reference has been made, and I think it is a normal, government language, to refer to our legislative frameworks as, frameworks, if I could put it that way. Now, you have, Advocate, referred to the concerns around the implementation of the legislation itself once there's enactment, the post-legislative implementation and monitoring, but we are also going to be looking at making sure that there are evaluation processes that also ensue. The reason why you are not seeing that in the amendment bill itself is because we are going to be embarking on a process where we are going to come up with regulations that are going to support the implementation of the amendment bill. I indicated during my presentation when I talked to the responsibilities of the officers of the Premier to say we will further outline even the roles of MECs. We have also impacted hugely in terms of this legislative framework, the roles of providers of services. We've also touched also on the roles of those that are in authority and those that provide services, which is also impacting on our practitioners. But when we talk about the removal of an older person from a space where they are abused, it implicates basically anyone, because we are saying if any person is aware of the abuse of an older person and they do not report that, they can also be held liable. And so I just wanted to indicate that this legislation, does impact on everyone. And the reason why I mentioned the protracted process that we embarked upon when we were consulting on this legislation, it was specifically to make sure that its reach and its impact is understood by everyone. Government departments have been brought on board. Our stakeholders have been brought on board. NPOs in their diverse forms, as well as our private sector. We have brought everyone on board. And it is our utmost belief that everyone in the space, noting their core mandates and responsibilities, now understand what their effective contributions have got to be once this legislation gets to be, once this bill gets to be enacted. So we are expecting that the reach should be felt even at the level, of communities. And hence, I indicated that we have now also established the South African Older Persons Forum with the support of the Human Rights Commission, which we are also expected to account to. So this forum has got to be operational at national level. We are funding the forum to make sure that it's effective, its boards are established at within the timeframes that they are supposed to be established. At provincial level, those boards must be existent, district level, regional levels, and tailored, making them to be operational even within communities. The outgoing minister used to say those must be visible even across every street. So that's how far we want these structures to operate. But what is also important is that we are bringing on board all key community leaders. Houses of traditional leaders have been involved very extensively in terms of our road shows on public hearings with the portfolio committee. They were all brought on board, and just to make sure that we sensitize communities, even community leaders, they were part of these engagements. So we are expecting that each person would begin to understand their key roles and responsibilities. The sayers that I talked about earlier on, we did that in partnership with the DPME, and there was a reason why, because the Department of Monitoring and Evaluation should take responsibility for making sure that it coordinates and sees and holds accountable various government departments in terms of making sure that they have warm bodies, they have resources, and that they dedicate themselves in line with their core mandates in terms of making sure that they deliver on every section of this legislative framework that impacts on them. We will further outline their roles and responsibilities when we get to a point where we draft the regulations so that those are very clear. But also to deal with the issues of intersectoral collaboration. We have already started bilateral engagements with various government departments. As I indicated, the issues that I was raising of intermediary, provision of services, support to older persons who report their cases, those are ongoing discussions with the Department of Justice. We are also looking at making sure that we link the work that we do with their systems, and where we have systems in place, those systems must also be linked. Like, for example, the issue of population of the system where elder abuse statistics is being loaded. Justice has got to make sure that we link that system with theirs once people get to be sentenced, so that the systems begin to speak to one another. So it is those kind of things that are progressively moving to the direction where we want to go. And again, I indicated it was for the first time that various government departments went together to go and account to the portfolio committee. I forgot to also indicate we also had the Department of Human Settlements. They had to come and tell the portfolio committee how many houses have they allocated to older persons, and we have agreed with them that going forward we need disaggregated data which will speak to the numbers, whether it was a male, in which months, and so forth, so that when we go and account to Parliament or to Cabinet, everyone has got proper information, systems in place to account for the work that they do. So I've indicated that the issue of the wage that is drawing between the generations, we picked it up through these public hearings. And we are also, post the public hearings, we are also noting the ongoing videos and so forth that are trending. So we realize that it is necessary that we really pause. We know that part of the reasons why you see grandchildren or family members or whoever chasing after the social grants of older persons is due to one of the key things is unemployment. Because if they were working, they would not really be chasing after a 2,000 rand amount of money that is received by an older person. But we sit with that situation. Older persons have also become second-time parents where they've got to contribute to the raising of their own children. And unfortunately, for many of them, they've also taken these grandchildren to school. They're sitting with graduates that are not working. And those graduates also have children. And it becomes a problem for them to also survive. They've got peers that they need to also live, alongside with, and it's a challenge. This is a general South African challenge, the issue of unemployment. So we are saying perhaps we need to pause as various, key stakeholders and reflect on the kind of programs that are there for youth in the country in general, but also to look at how best can we come up with programs that will close the wedge that has started to exist between the two generations. And the roles and responsibilities of older persons as articulated in the amendment bill are there to just guide what are the key things that they can do. But those will be felt within communities. I did indicate that we're noting that the family is being challenged at this point in time because it doesn't send a message that it is still a safe space for everyone. When you look at the kind of lives that some older persons are living within their own families. So the family as a unit is being challenged, and we are saying we can't manage the plight of a family without making sure that there are programs that speak to families, but those must also move out into the communities. And as a result, moving from the family into the communities, into the space where our traditional and local leaders are involved, that will then be quite a very progressive approach in terms of making sure that we bring everybody on board. But lastly, just to indicate that when we conclude all these processes, we are going to go out and facilitate the training, the reorientation, and the bringing on board of everyone. Those that are affected by this legislation need to understand what roles are they going to play, when are they expected to execute those roles, how are they expected to execute those roles, the resourcing and the commitments that go with them being part of this legislation. So bringing on board the Department of Health, we've talked about that. We also heard our colleagues from the province talking about that. I did also mention that the Department of Social Development is the lead department in terms of the implementation of this legislation. The legislation falls squarely within the ambit of the Minister of the Department of Social Development, but without all the key stakeholders and key organs of state making their contributions towards the effective implementation of this legislation, we are not going to be able to make the necessary inroads in terms of effectively implementing the legislation. I hope that I have been able to cover some of the key areas. You talked about the Section 7 as well, relating to the rights of older persons, and I did articulate specifically which sections we have re-looked into and why those amendments and some of the issues that they also came from the general public as proposals to the strengthening of the legislative framework. So I'm going to hand over to Mr. Advocate Mchochisa to also, make additions in areas where I might have left something. Thank you very much.
Through you, Honorable Chair.
Excuse me, my apologies, Advocate, for interrupting you. At this stage, we're just going to excuse Minister Lund, who's got another engagement with the GBV ambassadors in Mitchell's Plain. Minister, thank you so much for your attendance.
Thank you, Chairperson, and for all the colleagues. And please convey the very important message that this legislation needs to be funded. It's all good and well having this, but we need to have it funded. We can't scrape around more on our bottom line. So thank you so much. Have a blessed day.
Thank you for that parting message, Minister. Duly noted. Advocate, you may proceed.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chair and Honorable Members. Just to add a few words, otherwise my colleague, Mr. Hodu, has responded to almost everything that was raised by advocates there. But just to indicate the issue of the intersectoral approach to legislation, and this is not a unique piece of legislation that we have, the Older Persons Act. the majority of our pieces of legislation, more especially in our department, that is Department of Social Development, are intersectoral in nature. You've got various departments having to play a role. And during the process of the development of legislation itself, one of the key forum that the legislation has to go through before it gets to be passed into law is the clusters, where all these director generals sit and make commitments and they read through these provisions. This is what is expected of my department as a DG for health, as a DG for agriculture, or DG for education and all that. And they make commitments and agree and make sure that the legislation is processed further to the other stages. So we need not worry much as to whether these other departments are going to play their role. They will. If they don't, there are legislative mechanisms as to how do you deal with a department that does not act in terms of the legislation that exists in the country. So I just wanted to indicate that. And we are also aware that sometimes legislation is not adhered to by those it seems to affect at the end of the day. This is not a unique one as well in that context. But when we legislate mainly for some of the areas for behavioral change. That is why we have to go for capacity building and conscientize those that the legislation is going to affect, to say this is what the law is all about, and this is what it's saying, and we expect people to behave in a certain way, that is to adhere to the principles enshrined in a particular legislation. I'm mindful of the example that we have given in relation to the Department of Education and the parents. It is a cross-cutting issue. Even with common law, I mean, the laws are there, but there are people who still violate them. So it is in the same context as this legislation. We hope that when the law is there, those who are tasked with ensuring the enforcement of the legislation will play their role to say this is the legislation that exists and this is what people are expected to do. So that is my addition to what my colleague has just presented. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Colleagues, at this point, we are suspending proceedings. We will be back at 11:10, after which members can then pose their inputs and ask the necessary questions. Thank you.
impact assessment with them. We do not look forward to losing sight of the DPME, and we are expecting and hoping that we will continue working together with the DPME in terms of making sure that every government department is held accountable in terms of its roles and responsibilities. But having said that, we are not leaving the responsibility in the hands of the DPME. We also have started establishing an intersectoral cluster on the basis of the engagements with the DGs of various government departments to make sure that we meet on a regular basis. We work on critical issues that impact on the provision of services to older persons together. That structure is not really sitting as regularly as we would want to, but we are hoping and looking forward to having the regulations in place, orientating and guiding everybody in terms of what their roles and responsibilities would be, and making sure that all the aspects as aligned to the various mandates of different government departments would be understood by those that need to implement them in that particular way. And once those are there, the structure, which is intersectoral, will continue sitting to ensure that we work together towards making sure that this legislation receives the priority attention that it deserves, to make sure that it is effectively implemented. We appreciate the comments that have been made in terms of the 5-year plans and annual performance plans and the framework that is in existence. But I also need to indicate that I think it is a good thing that the Premier's office has a framework that seeks to protect and promote the rights of older persons. And my view is it needs to be elevated to a point where various government departments need to understand their roles in terms of that. And however, with the understanding that the implementation of this framework by various government departments must not lose sight of the Principal Act, which is Act number 13 of 2006, but it should also take into consideration the imperatives of the Amendment Bill of 2022. As various government departments, implement this framework, they need to also take into consideration these key legislative frameworks. And I think because the Premier's office has this this framework in place, it would be good, like I indicated, in various provinces where the offices of the Premier work very well with the department and other government departments, you see a lot of good progress. I can make an example with KZN. It is our model for a province that really works very well, with government departments, where the Premier's office works very well with government departments and support government departments in terms of implementing the core mandates as their core mandates as different government departments, but also supporting the imperatives of the role of the forums as well as the implementation of the legislation, although it falls within the ambit of the Minister of Social Development. So good work does happen when collaboration is at play, and we do also look forward to making sure that we strengthen our collaboration through this intersectoral sector structure that I referred to, on the basis of our ongoing updates and discussions with the various DGs that sit at the SPC HDC cluster. And we will also on a regular basis provide them with feedback where we are experiencing blockages. And then I think there was something that was also said in terms of the removal of an older person. I need to indicate that when an older person is removed, and my advocate here will talk to the phrase removal. I don't want to talk about the issue of removal. We have looked at weights and we didn't have an alternative, but he will also further explain why we ended up with removal. So the removal of an older person is not something that we wake up to and say, because this is the situation that is happening, an older person must be removed. There is consultation with all the significant people that have got to be engaged in terms of the plight of that older person. If there's family will be engaged. If there are children, they will indicate where those that are older and in a position to can make decisions and engage with those in authority who see the risk that is being posed by the older person being held where the older person would be at a particular point in time, and the safety and security and the related or associated risks that would go with her or him being at that particular point in time. So there's a process of consultation. People don't just wake up and go and remove a person because they've just heard 1, 2, 3, because there are also arrangements for a place of safe care. There are timeframes that are attached to that. I talked about the protocol for the management of abuse or where an older person's safety is threatened. And so in terms of the intersectoral collaboration structure that I talked about earlier on, when we conclude on the regulations, we will be having all the key areas that are impacting on all the sections that we will have unpacked relating to this amendment bill. And on the basis of those, we'll also try and come up with TORs that are going to guide our engagements. How regularly are we going to engage, and what is it that is going to have to be in place for us to be able to deliver on what would be expected of us. I think, Advocate, you can also touch on the other areas.
Thank you, Ms. Legodo. Advocate, you may proceed.
Thank you, Chairperson, and thanks, honorable members, once again. The other issues that were raised around the issue of the complaints mechanisms as to how do you deal with these when the challenges come up in these places where we keep older persons, or if there is a failure to adhere to the provisions of the legislation. We must indicate that the intention of this bill is not necessarily to come up with such mechanisms, because they are already in place. Already in place in the sense that there are Chapter 9 institutions where we can always lay complaints against organs of state that do not necessarily adhere to the provisions of the pieces of legislation that they administer. So it is not the intention to rewrite the law, the existing piece of legislation, but to come up with the gaps that we have identified. So that is the issue. And again, this piece of legislation, if you look at its short title, it indicates that this act shall come into force on a date to be proclaimed by the president, meaning that there are still issues that need to be addressed before this act can come into force. If there are policies that need to be developed, if there are guidelines that need to be developed, if there are budgetary issues that need to be taken into account, those will first have to be put in place before the act itself is signed into law. Even if the president was to sign this piece of legislation tomorrow, it would not automatically come into force tomorrow. It would come into force on a day that will be proclaimed later, as the short title indicates. Again, with regard to the issue of the word removal, I understand the concern that it may sound a little bit harsh, but unfortunately we need to accept that this is a term that is being used in the sector. It is the term that is understood by those who operate within that particular space. It does not, it is not intended to be inhuman and all that. If we're to look at that, we don't need to look at it in isolation from other existing pieces of legislation. Whether you read the Children's Act, it will talk about the removal of a child to a place of safety. Whether you read the substance abuse legislation, it will tell you about the removal of a service user from one treatment center to another, or from home to a rehabilitation center. So I'm trying to say within the space itself, the word removal is understood in that context by those who implement these pieces of legislation. We must also take into account that indeed, as my colleague has mentioned, the issue of conscientization of the communities with regard to the coming into force of the legislation. Hence, there is always public participation before any law becomes final. so that those who will be affected by the piece of legislation itself are aware or ought to be aware of what is being brought to them. Yes, indeed, with regard to the roles and responsibilities of the other organs of state mentioned in this piece of legislation, it's not a matter of by the way, it's the nature of the document itself, which we term intersectoral in nature. The roles and responsibilities are often spelled out in this pieces of legislation, giving a directive, not just asking a particular director general to do ABC, but making it, giving a directive to a particular minister in other department, or even MECs or mayors in other pieces of legislation, that a mayor is expected to do 1, 2, 3. A premier is expected to do 1, 2, 3. And on that note, those functionaries are expected to perform in terms of the piece of legislation that gives a mandate to them. We must also differentiate in this regard between the primary mandate and the issue of concurrency, because these functions that you would find in other pieces of legislation outside the mandate of a particular department would be the concurrent functions that need to be taken into account as per the Constitution itself, Schedule 4 thereof, indicating what the concurrent functions are for the various government departments. So in that note, it is expected for those functionaries to understand that besides being the minister or DG of the Department of Health dealing with health issues, you also have other mandates of concurrent nature that are being say enshrined in other pieces of legislation. So it is in that context that if they don't perform those functions, the mechanisms are in place to deal with that in order to ensure that they do what they're expected to do. Thanks, Honorable Chair.
Thank you very much, Advocate. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, thank you, Honorable Chair and members. There's a few questions, not too many, but I will be short and sweet. Yeah. So the one question is about the fact that a person goes to an old age home and you see there's actually still enough bed space so that the person can expand. The main reason is why these NGOs don't expand, they can't afford it. For a frail person, it costs 11,000 Rand per month. DSD only contributes in the Western Cape 3,500 Rand per month. That's all we have. Then, and as Ms. Mimosa said, we were placed in the position, and it's not that we did not pitch to Provincial Treasury. We've been doing it for 6 years, pitching for more funds. So you get the 3,500 for a frail person per month. Then, according to the regulations of the Older Persons Act, 90% of the SASSA grant can be used by the old age home to contribute to that bed space. So that would be about 1,800, 1,900. That still brings us a total of DSD subsidy plus the older person's contribution of 90% to just a little bit below over 5,000 Rand. So your old age homes are sitting with a cash flow problem. If they take in more people, that means they need more staff, more nurses, more carers, which they can't afford. So you would find that in certain places, some of the NGOs do actually cross-subsidize, where they will take in people if they can, where it's people with private pension funds, people that do not belong to SASSA or do not get money from SASSA. So they will charge those people as far as possible the highest amount, and then we use some of that money to cross-subsidize the ones that's SASSA recipients. That's the vicious circle that's been happening in old age homes. But as Ms. Mimosa said, your cost of living, we all know. Even families struggle nowadays just to survive with the basic daily food and supporting their children. What's still to say about institutions such as this, which is in our poor communities. This is the poorest, the ones that DSD subsidize is your poorest communities. We do not subsidize your Constantia private homes. We do not subsidize ones that's even middle income people. We only subsidize those in poor and vulnerable communities. So that's unfortunately the expansion a bit of a problem. Specifically, even if you look at Johannes and Beaufort West, because that's also an issue. That's also one that could be expanded, but that just can't afford it. The other questions relates from member Kasim, but I see she's not here, but I will then still proceed. So why don't we have a state-funded one?
Mr. Jordan, member Kasim is online.
Oh, is she? Fantastic. Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Chair. So state-funded. 2000 and 2005, this department did have its own government-funded old age home. It was at where currently the Nova is, where we've got our rehab for children. That place was years ago decided not to continue because of the costs. Now, if you look at our department, currently there's 500 of a post that's unfunded that we can't fill. There's just not money to even appoint more staff. If we need to look at the state-funded one, yes, we probably can get a building from Department of Public Works. We need capital to do renovations, to adjust it and adapt it according to the regulations for older persons specifically, because older persons need to sleep in a specific square meter as per the regulations. There's got to be protocols on systems. There's got to be specific stuff on food. So to implement a state-funded old age home will be very expensive. Then if I look at who's predominantly the staff in an old age home, that's your registered nurses and carers. If I look first and foremost on our staff establishment, we're social workers. That means we will have to start an organizational development process. DPSA needs to approve that. Then those salaries needs to be exactly what has been negotiated with the unions on a national bargaining council level, stating that this is the salary of a nurse. If I look at that salaries of the nurses versus the NGOs, it's triple more than government's nurses are earning. Triple compared to what the nurses and the carers are getting in old age homes. So the main reason for why we don't have one is just not cost effective. It will cost us triple the amount to run an old age home compared to what an NPO is running it for. Not saying that it should not be done. It's just not practically in this circumstances, this economic environment, not feasible for us to do that. Then the other question was about how do we deal or serve older persons in townships and informal settlements. I think that's where it's so important, what we've been talking about. It's your community-based services. So the Older Persons Act talks about residential homes. There's a chapter on community-based services specifically. And that's where we need to expand our services. It is more affordable. It's not like an old age home's expenses. That goes back to we've got to expand and establish more senior clubs, service centers. This is a perfect environment where older persons can come daily. They get their food per day. And some of them actually take the food to take back to their children as well, or their grandchildren. This is where we talk to them about abuse, show them how we can support them. This is where you've got people talking about Alzheimer's issues. This is where they do a little bit of active aging, exercises and so forth. And I think the most important thing is where they actually meet people of their own peers. If there's abuse happening in your house, you do not want to share it with the police even, not often. My 20 years experience have seen that older, specifically in this field, older persons is inclined to rather keep it quiet. It's like exactly that one with the lady with the video that went viral, with her grandson abusing her. She refused to lay charges against him. I say thank heavens that somebody from SAPS and everybody actually stood up and for the first time went according to the Older Persons Act and prosecuted that child. Otherwise, it wouldn't have happened. So that's something positive for me to see actually how our sister departments such as SAPS, they're slowly coming to the party. Before, an abused person was taken on with the Domestic Violence Act, not the Older Persons Act. That act is there to be used. We've had many engagements with SAPS as a department. Some I just did not take, but I'm so glad to see. It's unfortunately what has happened. There's so many more abuse cases that we're just not aware of. It's not being reported. So it is important for me when we do community services. This is where you talk about abuse. Sometimes an older person don't even realize they're going through about abuse. If my grandchild swears at me from the morning to the evening and complained about the food that I've made, they don't sometimes even realize this is also a form of abuse. Usually people see abuse as something physical, or when somebody takes your money, your SASSA money. That's the two main things that's happening. But emotional abuse is something more serious that people tend to forget. Then the honourable member also asked about, is more facilities needed? If you look at the spirit of the Act, the Older Persons Act specifically of 2006, and also true what my colleagues from National has said, that Act 2006 was signed by the President in 2006, but it was only implemented from April 2010. So it took 4 years after it was approved. So I'm glad we're having these discussions. It's not to say that this act is going to be implemented tomorrow morning, but it gives us time to get our ducks in a row. If we need to get money, we need to start lobbying for money. If we need to put systems, coordinating systems in place in that province, then we need to do that. So it gives us an ample opportunity now to start already now as officials that's involved and as committee members to start promoting this. When it comes to number of facilities, the Act is very clear. The Act says that an older person should stay in the community as long as possible. That's the spirit of the Act. The moment you place an older person in an institution like an old age home, they do get isolated. That contributes sometimes to a demise of an older person because of loneliness, because we know the children don't come and visit them. They're not interested. Not all the cases, but it's a trend I'm seeing. So the idea would be that an older person must stay in the community as long as possible. An old age home should be a place where they are frail. They need 24/7 nursing care, where the family cannot cope with that. Then only an old age home should become a relevant institution. An old age home should not be a place for a vivacious young older person running around active, brain is going, still contributing so much. They should not be in an old age home. They should be in the community, participating and contributing to their community and to their children and stuff. In the Western Cape, if you look at the number of facilities we've registered over a question of 5 years, it's standing at 232. We as a Western Cape province are way over of what we should have for older persons. Usually, if I recall correctly, the Act specifically looked at plus minus 2% of your older person's population should be made provision for. Now, we've got over 800 people, 800,000 at this stage. 2%, if I'm correct, and I'm not a mathematician, it's about 16 to 17,000 people. The people in the private homes and the people in the 113 ones we fund is way over that. Just alone, the number of people in the old age homes we fund is over 10,000 people already. That's just the NGOs. So I'm excluding now all the private ones. That would probably be another 20, 30,000. So my personal feeling is that we have really done what I don't think there should be new old age homes. What should be done is the ones that's currently there should be more maintained infrastructure-wise. So it's been very difficult for government because those properties do not belong to public works or to government. Those properties belong to the NGOs. So there's a whole thing with public works or in Department of Infrastructure where they don't easily do maintenance and renovations at places that's not government institutions. So that goes in, how do we get private sector involved? And let's not rely the whole time on provincial treasury or national treasury. How do we get private sector involved to identify? And we've got a list of old age homes that need serious maintenance. How do we get private sector involved to actually contribute to that old age home so they can improve their maintenance? That's where we should be now with old age homes. Waiting list was also another thing that the honourable members asked. There is in some places waiting lists and in some places not. So first and foremost, this department, since we are not the owners or the managers of these old age homes, we do not control admission, neither do we control waiting lists. Neither can we interfere in any labor or appointments of anything of our old age home because it's not our staff, it's NGO's staff. So coming to the waiting lists, there's some of them that will have easily up to 15, 16. There's some of them that don't. And as I've mentioned in the last standing committee, unfortunately in winter time, there is a natural process. Due to the vulnerability of older persons, they do catch pneumonia very quickly and very easily because of their age. And that's something that we all need to know because we're all getting to that age that we need to take care of yourself. And unfortunately, you will see that the death rate, natural death rate, is higher in old age homes in the winter times than you would see in the summer times. That's the analysis I've seen over this past 20 years. The matter of the fact is, therefore, your waiting list is not necessarily always that long because vacancies go open quite quickly during the winter times. If there is a waiting list, then it could be maximum of 3 to 4 months that it can take to have a person coming in. Then I think one of the members asked about, yes, we will make a list of things that where we can see Department of Health can assist us and then provide it, because I think, Honourable Member, that is something very overdue. I don't think all the persons get discussed in any other standing committee besides this one, as far as I know. Yeah, so that would be appreciated. Municipalities, yes, the funding for municipalities. Something very sad for me is that in 2003, I started the Golden Games, and Ms. Sybil can testify to that. I'm the one that started this in South Africa. I'm the one that took it to national and promoted the whole model. Unfortunately, it's a very sad position that a few years ago, I've been told I can no longer implement it in this province. So we do not participate in the active aging program, the national one. Neither do we participate in the provincial one. Neither do we budget for this because of our budget cuts. Neither do we contribute to municipalities to actually promote this. I think it's a very important thing that we need to relook at our position of municipalities for their IDPs. If you look, there is usually human rights mainstreaming issues within an IDP that will look at youth, a little bit on disabilities, not really about children in the municipality stuff. They will have community programs like HIV/AIDS maybe, but older persons and people with disabilities in general is silent in most of the IDPs. So that is something that we need to maybe promote a little bit more, push a little bit more, so that municipalities also can start budgeting for these kinds of active aging programs. I don't think we should ask a municipality to start their old age home. We should rather ask them to contribute and see if they can start contributing to community services. I mean, most of the municipalities do have a directorate of community services, so that would be a perfect thing where, how did they get involved with the older persons? They can help with a service center, set up one, so the old people can come together. They can do a little bit of sporting activities with them, all on a community level, not take on the responsibility of an old age home. That's too expensive, and the norms and standards is extremely high. And unfortunately, the specialists are not in the municipalities when it comes to monitoring of old age homes. So that is something I think that needs to be looked at definitely going forward. Then I think the one question, this is the last one, is how do we deal with the rights of individuals? It's very difficult. It's like I'm sitting at my house, I'm 16. I want to do what I want to because I've got the fullest right as a citizen if I want to participate in something or not. So the question of responsibility towards an individual is for this department very difficult to monitor. That means I have to be in every household in this province, which is impossible. So it is important. How do we get this message out? How do we do our awareness on this bill? We need to be very outspoken as a province about this bill. We need to say where we as a department and as a province stand on this bill. we need to make people aware that they do have rights, just as a child has rights. So does an older person. Even a person so much more, because they've lived a long life. They've contributed to society for so many years, for so long. They've left legacies. If I just look around in our communities and in structures in our province, so many older persons that have contributed to so many things, leaving legacies. But it is also responsibility of each individual to be aware of it, of their rights, so that they can stand up and fight for their rights as well, knowing that there is some institutions like this department that can support them if they have an issue to fight about. And then just the last thought. I think a standing committee will experience a lot of complaints coming through. There is so many complaints, and it's something that's just escalating this past 3 months, of old age homes. People complaining about old age homes. It's very sad to see that some of the complaints have a personal agenda. And in some cases, it's legit what they're saying. If I look at some of the complaints, it is sometimes about because of the cash flows. Cash flows in the old age home has effect with services, and Ms. Mimosa did say it. We're starting to see services going downwards because of lack of money in old age homes specifically. So as a committee, you will pick up there's much more complaints coming through. It will have an effect on everything. It will have effect on salaries. It has an effect on sometimes on food. It has an effect on medical care. And I think as my last thought, that is why it's so important that we do pitch as a collective correctly. How do we obtain more funds? Might it be national, provincial treasury, but also from the private sector. Government is there to create an environment, but we cannot always solely do things by ourselves because of lack of funding and so forth. But we need to take hands and with private companies and see how we can push this forward. Thank you very much, honourable chair members.
Thank you very much to both national and provincial departments. Honourable, excuse me, members that posed the questions, do you have any follow-ups? Okay, can you reserve your closing comment? Member Mare, I'll get back to you. Any follow-ups?
Mine is also a comment.
Sure. That will also be a closing comment. I don't see any further hands at this side. Sunjika?
Follow-up online.
Member Kasim, you have a follow-up?
Yes, I do. Thank you very much, Chairperson. I just wanted to follow up with the member from the department. He mentioned and he made it clear that he doesn't think, or he rather don't think that there should be more facilities built in the province, and rather that the NGOs who currently have those care facilities should be maintained.
Member Kasim, I do apologize for interrupting you, but your sound is not that clear. Is it possible that you can make an adjustment?
Can you hear me now, Chairperson?
But better, yes, please proceed, member.
No problem. I just wanted to follow up. The member from the department said that he doesn't believe that there should be more facilities built in the province, and that the current care facilities, which is obviously run by NGOs, should rather be maintained. I just wanted to check, is that the department, or is that him saying that he doesn't see a need for more facilities, especially in poorer communities, because we know that it's a reality that not in all communities, there's not facilities for elderly people in all communities, especially in poorer communities and informal settlements. So I just wanted clarity on that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, member. Mr. Jordan.
Yeah, no, that is my personal opinion, but also looking at the legislation, where the legislation says not more than 2% of your older person's population should be. But I hear member Kasim's cry. There's specifically not many facilities in Mitchell's Plain, neither is there in Kailicha, if I've got to use areas. But when we put up facilities, then we need to look at municipal bylaws. Is the environment conducive regarding zoning? Is the environment going to be conducive for municipal bylaws? So yeah, so maybe in those specific areas like Mitchell's Plain, there's just one old age home in Mitchell's Plain currently. If you look at the population, it's very big, but also emphasizing that the old age homes facility should be used for a place for frail people, not for people being dumped by their families because they no longer want them in their house. If that concept is being used correctly, then I would support residential facilities in those specific two areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jordan. And then over to you, Ms. Sonjika. And thank you for your patience.
Thank you, Chairperson. Excuse my eagerness. I believe the members have covered some of my questions and the responses as well. We will, however, engage the department because the Commission for Gender Equality is currently doing an investigation on the abuse of elderly persons. So we'll reserve those questions for our engagement with them. And yeah, I'm covered. The members have covered me. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. And thank you for being here this morning as well. And be sure you're most welcome at these committee meetings. And we look forward to see you on the trail when we engage in public participation as well with the communities. Thank you very much. Members, in the absence of any further questions or comments, Member Boyson, I'm going to give you 30 seconds, as well as you, Member Masipa. Just a comment from your side, Ms.
Yeah, I just want to make a final comment linked to what Mr. Jordan was raising in terms of the spread of facilities. One thing that the House needs to also note is that we do acknowledge the fact that there are challenges in terms of access to services in general, especially for those rural and peripheral areas of our country. Our rural communities, indeed, as the member was indicating, do not have access to many facilities that are based in the urban area. And that goes for residential care facilities. Now, whilst we acknowledge that we would not be in a position to have a residential facility in every community, there is need for such services to also start moving to the peripheral and rural areas of our country. And because as it is now, we're also noting the growing spread or manifesting of facilities that are not registered. Ms. Momoza talked about facilities that are not registered. And the reason why we strengthen the issue of deregistration is also to try and address such challenges. But we need to also make sure that we cannot just remove services without being considerate of the needs of such communities. Like I indicated, whilst we also take note that we can't bring such facilities in every community, but we know that in most of those areas, access to services remain a challenge, and we need to make sure that there is that deliberate effort of moving, services to such areas. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Lekgodu. Member Boyson, your time has just been halved. Please continue.
Thank you, Chairperson. As a committee, we will drum up this bill under your leadership, including the comments. Thank you.
Member Masipa, as a visitor, and now you must treat very careful.
It's given me 20 seconds. So really, I think the answer that you've given me, advocate, but I do believe that the removal is still for me a concern. Life as a Dimeni is one such example that really talks to that. But I also, with advocates' concern about the monetary and evaluation, I think it must find a way in the bill so that it's an act that really we can, as a member of this committee, be able to hold the executive to account appropriately. And I do support the equity issue that, in terms of the numbers that you have given, it means that in the Western Cape, one old age home to 30,000. I think that kind of is good number, but we must make sure that we have got a fair representation in terms of ensuring that Kailija, Gugule, Tulanga also, have old age home. Thank you, Chair. I use the 30 seconds of Mr. Mare as well.
Thank you very much, Member Masipa. Member Mare.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, just in concluding, life issue Dimeni must never recur again We must learn the lessons and then improve going forward, especially when it comes to it having had to go to court to find out who was accountable. We need the law to be clear who's responsible. If you remove someone from one place and park them somewhere else. Secondly, finance must follow function. If national gives us more responsibility or function, let the finance follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Member Mare.
For the
And
first
then
time, I agree with Member
closing,
Mare.
order colleagues, in closing, Advocate Master.
Chairperson, I'm very mindful of the time. I'm also anticipating the negotiating mandate that's staring at us down the line. So just very briefly, in my 20 years here, I have yet to encounter a bill that lands and there's budget for it. We always have the comments from everyone here. We've always had it in past years that contestation in budget terms. NHI landed, Bella landed, big costing implications. I was startled to hear from the provincial director that since 2021, 2022, as much as we heard that there's been a growing population of aging people, since 2021, the budget has declined. A disconnect between budget and reality. And we heard about cost cutting and. So that being said, that's one. Two, the colleague from National also mentioned, and I'm mindful of this, of the intersectoral forum, which hasn't met frequently and. Fact. I also heard that at various national forums, DGs are present and they are sensitized about the implications on their budgets and APPs and when it comes to bills of this nature with extensive cost implications. Yet bills come through thick and fast, and we always have this thing of cost implications. I am then asking, and I'm mindful of the negotiating mandate coming up, I'm then asking for a response from the department, very briefly. Is the department averse? And let me just insert the following. There are 13 national departments impacted by this bill. 13. It's the most I've seen in my 20 years. One bill, 13 departments. So, question. Is the national department averse to the legal establishment, in other words, introduce it in this bill, to the legal establishment of a national older persons coordinating committee with the mandate to ensure the coordination of legislative imperatives, with powers and functions for each portfolio within the cabinet that must meet. Intersectoral forum hasn't met for a few times and things fall through the cracks. However, let's legislate it, because you see, we don't make laws because we have time. We make laws because it's a reality need. So is the National Department averse to the introduction of a legally established National Older Persons Coordinating Committee with the mandate to ensure coordination of legislation pertaining to to older persons across the cabinet portfolios, with the following powers and functions, with the following meeting times? It could be once a quarter. Regulations can sort that out, so that someone, and this bill with 13 departments implicated, this department is properly situated and mandated to drive this process so that there is proper coordination. So in future, when going forward, we won't have a dramatic decline in budget allocation, yet the reality speaks the opposite. For coordination, correlation, and for budget alignment, surely we can't just make laws because we feel good about it. We make it with good intentions, but reality must dictate, follow the money.
Thank you very much. Advocate, you want to respond?
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, we appreciate the comment. We have taken note of that. And we must also be mindful that this is work in progress. We still have the NCOP to discuss this issue, and we take it further like that. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, at this point, allow me to thank the National Department of Social Development, Thank you also to our provincial department, Mr. Stofile. Thank you for attending our meeting this morning, Advocate Marsdorp, and our guests from the is it Commissioner for Gender Equality. And I hope it's not the last time that we see you at a committee engagement, but thank you so much for attending this morning as well. So at this point, we will see you at the various public engagements, I'm very sure. All the best with what you need to do, and have a blessed day further. At this point, we will excuse you, so we will further conduct our business as the committee. Thank you.
Email.
Yes.
And phone print the land or I print the land. Yes, this is Nazo. I will email it.
Yeah. Sure.
John, do I can an email address? Yeah.
Must remove the removals.
Why? Oh, still. At BSD. Oh, still.
Move the removal.
Oh, okay. Yes, and you
You know that was in Parliament.
Oh, okay.
I wanted to say, but the chair just.
Keep well. All the best. Thank you so much.
The removal, because that removal there is any. It's ruthless.
Okay.
And similarly,
Okay. I'm glad.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, sure. Thank you so much. Keep well.
It's going to be like that even during the public hearing.
Yeah.
once we
Yeah.
Oh, I've emailed them to the NSOP, but I'll forward the email to you now after.
Thank you so much.
I'm a witness to that. Yeah, you're a witness. Move the removal. But did you see how they remove people there in Parliament? The white shirts, yeah. So.
Order members, we are still in session. We're just giving an opportunity for our guests to exit.
At least this one is on record.
Members, based on our meeting this past Friday, members will remember that you had an opportunity up until yesterday to submit your resolutions and recommendations. I am now using my powers as the chairperson to give you an extension until the end of business today to submit such to Ms. Jamke, please. In the absence, we will then assume that members do not have any further recommendations and resolutions based on our very important discussion this past Friday. Colleagues, I need to also remind you in terms of the public hearings. Remember, we already identified the areas where we're going to have these public hearings. During our committee meeting on the 16th of August 2024. And the only matter that stood between us and confirming those dates and venues was confirmation from the Chief Whip whether there are dates available. And we have confirmed that, so that is also published in the parliamentary program. So during the meeting of the 16th of August, the committee resolved to schedule 6 public hearings on this bill, which mean it is 1 per region in the Western Cape. The hearings will be as follow. Thursday, the 3rd of October from 4 until 6 in George. Wednesday, the 9th of October from 10 until 1 in Saldanha Bay. Friday, the 11th of October from 4 to 6 in Beaufort West. Wednesday, the 16th of October from 10 to 1 in Worcester. And Thursday, the 17th of October from 10 to 1 in Caledon. And Friday, the 18th of October from 4 to 6 at 7 Wales Street in the chambers. Colleagues, we have confirmed there's just a few venues, 2 venues that needs to be confirmed. And when I speak about venues, remember, we've identified now the places where it's going to take place. So just the actual venues, there's just 2 actual venues that Ms. Jumpkin needs to confirm, and that is Beaufort and Worcester. When Beaufort and when Worcester we're going to have them. So that one is sorted. We now just also need to decide on the form of advertisements. So in terms of the newspaper, the suggestion is that the committee utilizes the newspapers that reach the whole Western Cape, namely the Weekend Argus for English, the Weekend Burger for Afrikaans, the City Vision for isiXhosa, and in addition, the advert can be sent to the municipalities and to any other relevant stakeholders in order for them to mobilize stakeholders to attend these public hearings. We have also submitted a request, and we'll just follow up on that request to the WCPP Public Education and Outreach section to assist with the public participation process. I know through their various engagement during this time, they sensitized communities based on this bill that is coming, so they have assisted us greatly in that regard. Colleagues, PO will also assist us in coordinating transport on request to and from the hearings. And at that point, colleagues, I also just need to emphasize as well. Please note that Parliament do not pay for political activists or your branch members or political support members to assist the hearing. This is a government outreach, or rather parliamentary outreach. So please do make sure when you do engage with PO or know of stakeholders that they will directly engage to ascertain that it is related to what we are dealing with. Communications, Namonde, will be utilized as well. WCPP communication platforms will assist the committee by spreading the word about these scheduled hearings. Communications must send out a media statement and create pamphlets as an additional communication strategy for the bill. And obviously that will be shared with us as community members as well. And so we would be able to share it broadly as well. Members, as I said, can also communicate the public hearings with stakeholders in the constituencies. The advert and the copy of the bill will be made available for the members that need them. The committee can further advise on the stakeholders to be invited to the public hearings. We have public education and outreach online. Is it Mr. Kaya?
Good afternoon, Chair.
Good
And
afternoon, and thank you so
honorable members.
much. Thank you so much for being with us this afternoon and for your patience in that regard. The floor is yours, sir.
Okay, thank you very much, Chairperson. For the benefit of honorable members, my name is Kaya. I'm in the Public Education and Outreach Department. Maybe, Chair, through you, just to give an overview of the work that we have done so far, and also maybe just outline the plans that we have going forward. As you have rightfully said, Chair, we have in our September programs that we have had both at WCPP and outside, have sensitized stakeholders that the public hearings planned for October. But also for the first public hearing in the current route, we are already planning. We are working with the Department of DSD, for example, there to identify and invite the relevant stakeholders, like, for example, your old age homes in the area, caregivers for all persons, NGOs and associations for the aged. And over and above that, Chair, from the 25th, 26 and 27, we are going to be in Knysna and Platt to create awareness of the process. and also possibly invite stakeholders who are interested to attend a public hearing in George. And then for those stakeholders that will not be attending in person, we will then encourage them, Chairperson, to submit their inputs in writing to Ms. Jamte. So yes, preparation now well underway, Chairperson. Thank you. I don't know if there's any questions or comment from members.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Mkonyana. Members, are there any questions for clarity? All members are covered. Thank you so much, sir, and all the best with your work as well. We appreciate you attending the meeting.
Thank you, Chair.
Colleagues, then also just to inform you, as I said, the George hearing is Thursday, the 3rd of October in George. And that will take place during our joint visit with health. And you can also see that we are there, so we might as well have our hearing as well. Twee vleie met een klap. And we're also saving cost and time in that regard. So the committees will be hard at work. The public hearing in Saldanha will be, as I said, on the 9th of October. We will drive to Saldanha on Wednesday morning and come back after the hearing. But Ms. Jamke will send us the possibilities in terms of us confirming whether members prefer to stay over or drive in the morning. That, as we've now done with a joint visit, will also reach members this week still. So you can then indicate Friday, the 11th of October, the committee will drive to Beaufort West the morning, sleep over in Beaufort and head back to Cape Town the Saturday morning. The Worcester hearing of the 16th of October, we will drive to Worcester on Wednesday morning for the hearing and drive to Caledon after and sleep over for the hearing on Thursday the 17th. The Caledon hearing on the 17th will be from 10 to 1 as said, and members will drive back to Cape Town after the hearing. Friday the 18th, here in Cape Town, after the committee meeting of the Standing Committee of Health and Wellness, we will then have our public hearing. So dis ook so te sê twee vleie met een klap. But after they have concluded their meeting, we will proceed with a metro public hearing on this amendments to this bill. Colleagues, after the public participation process, the committee will have to submit a negotiating mandate on the bill to the NCOP. And that is where we will then indicate whether we support or do not support. The committee itself can also make amendments to the bill. So every committee member has got a copy of the bill. I know there was preference for language. I'm not sure whether we have received Afrikaans. Not yet?
No, we requested, but it seems as if they don't have. So on our side, when it comes into the NCOP bill, we translate the adverts like in 3 official languages, which is Afrikaans, English, and Afrikaans, and Xhosa, sorry. But the bill, we get it from the NCOP, so we cannot translate it here ourselves. I've requested, they said they were going to look at it, but I have not gotten a response.
Okay. Thank you very much, Ms. Jamke, that you will follow up for us.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. The dates for the committee negotiating mandate meeting on the bill will be communicated with members in due course. Colleagues, at this point, this is all our business for today. Any comments, questions for clarity? Member Mare?
Madam Chair, I know I'm an alternate member on this committee, but I want to thank you for accommodating me. I will not be attending the, because I'm not accommodated, but should I decide to take a drive down myself with my own vehicle, I will do so. And I trust that that will be covered with my allowances and so on. And it will not be an expense to this committee then. Am I correct?
Ms. Jamke?
Yeah, and aiding allowance, Chair. Yeah, maybe, I don't know. Then
Mr. Daza?
Chair, if a member is an alternate member and she indicated that he wants to attend, we will have to decide. And I think the manager of committees can make it determined. I'm not sure if it will come straight from the enable or the committee may pay for it because it's a standing committee meeting. So I don't think there's anything wrong with the committee paying for that if you indicated. But we will have to check with the manager of committees.
Yeah, it's a WCPP obligation, member. You're
Yes.
a member, but just make sure should it come from your enabling allowance, I doubt if it will be from the committee side, because we've actually discouraged members that are alternate members for the sake of costs, for the cost saving measure, of course. So, but I'm sure there is a measure that you can be compensated in that regard. You are ultimately a member of WCPP. Member Masipa?
We did discuss, thank you, Chair. We did discuss within us in our portfolio with my procedural officer, and the indication was that the implication here is just on the budget that we have got as a committee. The choice is going to be the chairperson's ruling in that regard. I do not know if she was correct, but she did say that the call is on you, but the implication is going to be on your budget that you have got to really do your committee work. I don't know, but I just thought I will just.
Yeah, as a permanent member of a committee, it falls back on the committee. But as an alternate, we have taken the decision that it will only be permanent members to the committee based on the cost implications. But as a member of WCPP, you should be able to be reimbursed for your costs. Honorable members, that deals with our business. Thank you so much. Have a blessed week ahead. The meeting is adjourned.